grown man was screaming into the wind. Not a boy. Not a child. A grown man, 60 years old. On his knees in the snow, clawing at frozen dirt, with hands that had already turned the color of old bone. His hat was gone. His rifle was gone. His pride was gone. Behind him, the storm swallowed the mountain whole, and every shout he threw at the sky came back to him smaller than before. Below him, in the valley called Silver Creek, 7 bodies were already frozen in their beds. Cattle stood dead where they had stood the day before. Still on their feet, held up by ice. Children coughed blood into wool blankets that no longer held any warmth. And the man screaming on the mountainside was the same man who, only weeks earlier, had stood in the village square and told a 19-year-old orphan girl to take whatever she could carry and never come back. Now he needed her. Now the whole valley needed her. High above him, hidden behind a rough gray wall of stacked stone, that same girl quietly placed another flat rock beside a small fire. She did not look up. She did not smile. She only listened to the wind climb over her wall and disappear into the sky, the way she had taught it to. If the story stays with you, stay until the end. Because every stone on this mountain was placed for a reason. And every reason began long before that first scream. The village of Silver Creek did not have a proper church bell. It had a piece of iron rail, hanging from a rope, behind the meeting house. When something mattered, someone struck it with a hammer. That was all. On the morning of November 11th, 1886, the iron rail rang 3 times. Astrid Larsen heard it from her kitchen. She was cutting a small piece of dried apple. Her mother's kettle was on the stove. Her father's chair faced the eastern window. Everything was exactly where it had been the morning her parents left, and the morning after, and every morning of the year that followed. She stopped cutting. 3 strikes meant a village meeting. 3 strikes did not mean weather. 3 strikes did not mean fire. 3 strikes meant people. And when people called a meeting in Silver Creek without warning, someone was about to lose something. She looked at the chair by the window. She already knew. She had known for weeks. Because Elder Ezra Hollister had walked past her cabin 3 times in the last month. Slowly, studying the porch, studying the roof, studying the small well behind the house that never froze, not even in January. She had watched him from behind the curtain. She had said nothing, because what does a 19-year-old orphan girl say to a man who runs a village? She put on her father's coat. She tied her hair back with the leather strip. She walked into the cold. The village square was already full when she arrived. No one had run. No one had shouted. They had simply come. The way people come to a funeral they were told about the night before. They stood in a rough half-circle. Farmers, wives, the blacksmith, the 2 brothers who ran the sawmill, old Widow Doyle in her black shawl, thin as a fence post, the mercantile man whose name Astrid could never remember. Prudence Hollister, 7 months along, her hand resting on the front of her coat like she was holding something breakable, and in the middle of them all Elder Ezra Hollister, gray beard, broad shoulders, a folded paper in his hand. He did not look at Astrid when she stepped into the square. That was the first thing she noticed. He looked at the paper. Silas Hollister stood beside his father, 26 years old, tall, handsome enough in a soft way. He was staring at his own boots. His jaw was tight. Astrid had known Silas since her family moved into the valley 2 years ago. He had once helped her father lift a beam onto the barn roof. He had laughed at something her mother said in broken English. He had been kind. He was not looking at her now. Nobody was looking at her, except Widow Doyle. The old woman's eyes had not left Astrid since she walked into the square. And in those eyes there was something Astrid did not have time to name. Not pity, not anger, something older than both. Elder Hollister cleared his throat. He unfolded the paper. The land known as the Larsen homestead, he read, was never properly registered with the county of Helena. As such, under the settlement charter of Silver Creek, The property returns to the village. The village council has voted. The homestead is hereby transferred to Silas Hollister and his wife, effective today. Silence. The wind moved through the square. Somebody's horse stamped once in the distance. That was all. No argument. No question. No one turned to the girl standing alone in the middle of the frozen ground. Because everyone had already known. Everyone had come to watch it happen. Not to stop it. Astrid felt her hands go cold inside her mittens. Not from the wind. From something else. She looked at Elder Hollister. He was still reading from the paper, as if there was more to read. There was not. He was buying time. He was waiting for her to break. To cry. To beg. She did not. She said one thing. "What may I take?" Her voice came out flat. Steady. Not because she was strong. Because she had not yet decided to feel anything. Elder Hollister finally looked up. His eyes were the color of wet slate. "Whatever you can carry," he said. "No more. No less." Astrid nodded once. She turned around. She walked back to the cabin alone. Nobody followed her. Not Silas. Not Prudence. Not the mercantile man. Not the Sawmill brothers. Not even Widow Doyle. Every one of them stood in that square and watched her walk down the frozen path, past the church, past the empty water trough, past the alder tree, where her father had once tied a swing for a child that did not exist yet and never would. She did not look back. Because if she looked back, she would see them all still standing there, watching, waiting, making sure she really went. And she did not want to remember them like that. The cabin smelled like her mother. She had not expected that. It had been a year, a whole year, since her mother's voice had filled the small kitchen. A whole year, since her father had stomped his boots on the porch and told his wife the snow tasted like Norway that morning. A whole year of empty chairs and unopened jars and a hairbrush on the shelf that Astrid could not bring herself to move. But the cabin still smelled like her mother. Cedar smoke, dried apples, a little bit of lanolin from the wool she used to spin by the fire. Astrid stood in the doorway. Morning light reached across the wooden floor in a long yellow stripe. It touched the leg of her father's chair. It touched the corner of the rag rug her mother had braided the first winter they arrived. It touched the small tin cup that had been sitting on the table empty since the day her parents left. She closed the door behind her. She had until sundown, probably less. Whatever you can carry. She started with the blanket, the heavy one, wool, undyed. Her mother had woven it on a loom she brought all the way from Bergen, and the loom itself had been broken up for firewood in the second winter, because they needed the wood more than the loom. That was the way it worked here. You gave up one thing to keep another. Always. She folded the blanket small, tight. Next. Half a sack. Next. 3 potatoes, wrapped in cloth. Next. Pork fat. A small jar, sealed with wax. Next. Her father's flint striker, the one with the deer antler handle. Next. The skinning knife, cracked wooden grip, sharp enough. Next. Her father's rifle. She lifted it off the pegs above the fireplace. It was heavy. She checked the chamber. Empty. She had known it was empty. There had been no bullets in the house since March. But an empty rifle still looked like a full rifle. And on a mountain that was enough. She set the rifle by the door. Then she stood in the middle of the room. And she thought. There was something else. Something her mother had told her once. Years ago. Back in the second winter when Astrid was 17 and her mother was still healthy. Her mother had been kneeling by the fireplace, cleaning the ash. She had said, without looking up, "If anything ever happens to me, the loose stone, behind the hearth. Do you understand me, Astrid? The loose stone." Astrid had said yes without listening, because her mother said a lot of things that year, because the second winter was hard, because Astrid was 17, and stupid and thought her mother would always be there to remind her. But she remembered now. She knelt down by the fireplace. She ran her fingers along the back of the hearth. The third stone from the left was loose. She pulled it out. There was a hollow behind it. A small hollow, maybe the size of 2 fists. Inside the hollow was a folded piece of oilcloth, wrapped around something. She pulled it out. She sat on the cold floor. She opened it. Twist 1. There were 2 things inside. The first was a piece of paper. Thick, official, stamped with the seal of the Helena County Land Office. Dated May of 1884. Signed in her father's careful hand. It was the deed to the homestead. Legally filed. Legally recorded. Legally binding. Astrid stared at it. Her hands did not shake. Not yet, because she did not fully understand yet. Because Ezra Hollister had said in the square that the land was never properly registered. Except, it had been registered since May of 1884. 2.5 years ago, which meant Ezra Hollister had lied. To the whole village. In the square. In front of God and everyone. She set the deed down carefully on her lap. She picked up the second thing. It was a small leather notebook. Brown. Soft. Water-stained on the corner. Her mother's diary. Astrid had not known her mother kept a diary. She opened it. Her mother had written in Norwegian, mostly. Little things. The weather. The chickens. A recipe for beet soup. A dream about the fjord back home. Astrid turned the pages slowly. Then, near the end, the handwriting changed. Shorter. Sharper. Hurried. Twist 2. October 3rd, 1885. Eric home late again. Ezra Hollister came by the shop. He is asking about the West Ridge. He drew Eric a map. Eric says the road on the map is not right. He says the road goes into Cold Spring Pass. He says only fools go through Cold Spring Pass in October. But Ezra says it is a shortcut. Ezra says the loggers use it. I do not like this. Astrid stopped reading. Cold Spring Pass. Her father had been found. What was left of him? 200 yards inside Cold Spring Pass. In April, after the snow melted, there had been almost nothing left. A boot, a belt buckle. The rest, the wolves and the crows had taken. Her mother had never been found. She kept reading. October 7th. Eric still uneasy. He asked Reverend Cole about the route. Cole would not answer. Cole would not look at him. October 11th. We leave tomorrow. Ezra was at the door tonight. He was very friendly. He brought us a jar of preserved plums. I do not like preserved plums. Eric does not like Ezra. I made Eric promise if the pass looks bad, we turn back. October 12th. Leaving now. I will finish this when we return. God keep us. The pages after that were blank. Astrid closed the diary. She sat on the cold floor a long time. She did not cry. She did not scream. She did not do any of the things a 19-year-old girl was supposed to do when she learned her father and her mother had been sent to their deaths on purpose. By the man who had just taken her house. Because she was thinking. She was thinking very carefully. She was thinking that if she walked out of this cabin right now and stood in the village square and screamed the truth, no one would believe her. Because she was 19. Because she was a woman. Because her parents were dead. Because she was a Norwegian orphan whose accent still tripped over English L's on cold mornings. Because Elder Ezra Hollister ran the village and everyone in it owed him something. They would say she was hysterical. They would say grief had unhinged her. They would say the diary was written by a sick woman. They would say the deed was a forgery. They would say a lot of things. And by sundown they would take the deed and burn it, and by the next sundown she would be gone one way or another. No, she folded the deed. Small, neat. She slid it inside the lining of her coat, next to her ribs. She folded the diary. She slid it in beside the deed. She put the loose stone back in the hearth. She stood up. She looked around the cabin one more time. Her mother's kettle, her father's chair, the tin cup on the table, the rag rug, the stripe of yellow light on the floor. I will come back, she said, out loud, to the empty room, to her mother, to her father, to whoever was still listening. Then she opened the door and stepped back out into the cold. The village was still watching. They had not gone home. They had not gone to work. They had simply stood in the square for however long it took her, waiting. She walked out with the blanket roll on her back. The oats, the potatoes, the pork fat, the knife, the flint, the empty rifle across her shoulder. That was what she could carry. That was all she was allowed. No one spoke. She walked past Elder Hollister. He was watching her now. Finally, his slate eyes followed her all the way, through the square. She walked past Silas. Silas did not look up. She walked past Prudence, whose hand was still resting on her stomach. She walked past Widow Doyle. And Widow Doyle, only Widow Doyle, gave the smallest shake of her head. Slow. Once. Left to right. Astrid did not know what it meant. She kept walking. She walked to the edge of the village, where the road forked. One trail dropped south into the lower valleys, where a strange orphan girl might find work in exchange for food and a floor to sleep on. The other trail climbed east, toward Silver Ridge, toward the mountain. She stopped at the fork. She sat down on a fence rail. Her legs were shaking, not from the walk, from something she was not going to name yet. She closed her eyes. She heard her father's voice, not a memory of a voice. His actual voice, the way she had heard it 100 times, sitting on the barn floor, while he mended a saddle. He had said once without looking up, "Astrid, if you ever lose everything, go where the land still tells the truth." She had not known what he meant. Then, she thought she knew now. She opened her eyes. She looked south down into the valley. Warm, lower, safer, full of strangers who might or might not be kind. She looked east, toward the mountain, toward a place where nothing had been promised her, toward a place her father had walked with her once, in the summer she was 17, and had shown her which trees leaned toward hidden water. She stood up. She turned east. She started climbing. The climb lasted almost 3 hours. The trail vanished under old snow within the first mile. She followed the shape of the land instead, the way her father had taught her. Notice which way the pine branches lean. Notice where the snow is thin over the rock. Notice where the moss grows and where it does not. The mountain will show you a path, if you stop trying to make one. Her shoulders burned. Her palms burned. The cold air scraped the inside of her throat every time she breathed. She kept climbing. Halfway up, she stopped and looked back down. Silver Creek was small now, a gray thumbprint of buildings around a frozen creek. The smoke from the chimneys went straight up. No wind yet. The village looked, from up here, like something you could hold in your hand. She turned around and kept climbing. Near midday, she noticed something. 2 pine trees, leaning slightly toward each other. The ground under them was darker than the ground around them. Less snow. Dark green moss between the stones. Water. Hidden water. Shelter is always near water. Her father had said that too. She pushed through the branches. The mountain opened. There was a shallow rock hollow tucked under an overhanging cliff. Dry ground. Solid stone above. No animal tracks in the entrance. And most important of all, the moment she stepped inside, the wind stopped. Not softened. Stopped. She stood there a long moment. She listened. Nothing. No wind. No birds. No branches scraping. Only her own breathing. She lowered the blanket roll. She set the rifle against the wall. She sat down on the cold stone. Her hands finally shook. Now. Not before. Not in the square. Not in the cabin. Not on the fence rail. Now. Here. In the only place in the world where nobody could see her. She let them shake. She let her shoulders shake. She let one small sound come out of her throat. Only one. It did not have words. It did not need any. Then she wiped her face with the back of her mitten and reached for the first stone. She placed it against the wall of the hollow, next to the entrance. One stone. She looked at it. It was not much, but it was hers. She placed another beside it. 2 stones. She whispered in Norwegian the way her mother used to whisper to the bread dough. A little prayer with no name. Then she got up and went outside to look for more stones. By the time the sun began to slide behind the ridge, she had gathered close to 100. Her palms were raw. Her back was on fire. She had not eaten since breakfast. She sat inside the hollow and cut a potato into 4 small pieces. She ate 1 piece. She wrapped the other 3 in cloth and tucked them into the corner where a rat could not reach. She struck the flint. The first spark died. The second. The third caught a curl of dry pine bark she had shaved off the underside of a fallen log. A tiny orange flame. She fed it. Slowly. The little fire grew. She sat close to it. Outside, the sun was gone. Blue shadow filled the valley below. Silver Creek was already dark, only 3 or 4 squares of window light showing. She looked down at the village. She thought about Ezra Hollister sitting at her father's table tonight. Because he probably was. He probably had walked into her cabin the moment she left. He probably had run his hands over her mother's kettle. He probably had sat in her father's chair. She let herself think it. All of it. Then she let it go. For tonight. Because tonight she had to sleep. She wrapped herself in the wool blanket. She lay against the back wall of the hollow. Her fire threw a small trembling light across the stone. Her breath fogged in front of her mouth. She closed her eyes. She did not sleep. Not because she was afraid. Because her body was too tired to know how to stop. Twist 3. Sometime past midnight, she heard something. A boot. On stone. Outside the hollow. Her eyes opened. She did not move. She did not breathe. Her hand slid very slowly to the skinning knife beside the blanket. The boot again. Closer. Not a wolf. Not a bear. Person. Alone. Walking carefully, like someone who did not want to be heard, but who did not know the mountain well enough to be silent on it. The boot stopped just outside the entrance. Astrid tightened her grip on the knife. A voice. Low. Male. Shaking. Astrid. The Silas. Don't shoot. She did not answer. Because she was thinking. Because the empty rifle was still leaning against the wall on the other side of the fire, and by the time she reached it, whoever was outside could be inside. Because Silas Hollister was the son of the man who had killed her parents. Because Silas Hollister had stood in the square this morning and stared at his boots while his father took her home. Astrid. Softer. Please. She kept the knife in her hand. She said without moving, come in slow. Both hands where I can see them. The shape of a man ducked into the hollow. He was carrying something in front of him. Both hands out. A cloth bundle, tied with twine. He set it on the ground just inside the entrance and stepped back. His face was pale in the firelight. His eyes were red. He had been crying somewhere on the way up. He did not have a weapon. He was shaking, so badly his teeth were clicking. I brought bread, he said. And a little salt pork. And a candle. Astrid did not move. Silas. Yes. Why? He opened his mouth. He closed it. He tried again. Because if you die up here, he said, my father wins. He looked at her. And I already let him win once. The fire popped. A knot of sap. Silas sat down. Very slowly. On the cold floor. As far from her as the hollow would let him get. He put his hands on his knees, where she could see them. He looked at the flames instead of her. I know what he did, he said. To your mother and your father. Astrid's hand did not leave the knife. He didn't tell me. He never tells me anything. But I heard him, last winter, talking to Reverend Cole. In the back of the church. My father was angry. He said that Norwegian was going to file with the county in the spring. He said if the Larsons filed proper paperwork, the water rights on the West Ridge would be theirs by law. He said he had already sent them the map. And Cole said, God have mercy. And my father said, God has nothing to do with it. Silas stopped. He took a long breath. That was in December, he said. Your parents had been gone 8 weeks. I knew what he meant. I knew. And I did not say a word. Because he is my father. Because I am a coward. Because I have a wife who is going to have a baby in the middle of a Montana winter. and I do not know how to feed a baby without my father's stores. Because, 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 his voice broke. I have said because for a whole year. Astrid did not answer. Because she could not. Because if she opened her mouth, she was going to say something she could not take back. Silas wiped his face with the back of his sleeve. I know you have no reason to trust me, he said. I know that. I would not trust me either. I only came up here to say one thing. He looked up. Finally. Her. Don't die on this mountain. The fire moved between them. Don't die, he said. Because if you die, he wins. And this village is already so full of his winning that we can't breathe anymore. So please, whatever it takes, whatever you have to do, live. He stood up. Slow. Careful. He did not come any closer. There's bread and salt pork and a candle. There's flint in the bundle too. Better flint than yours. My father's second striker. He won't miss it. He never counts twice. He turned to leave. At the entrance, he stopped. He is going to come up here, he said. Not tomorrow. Not next week. But he is going to come. He does not like loose ends. And you are the loosest end of his life. He ducked out of the hollow. His boots crunched away into the dark. Astrid sat with the knife in her hand for a long time. She did not touch the bundle. Not for an hour. Not for two. Finally, near dawn, she reached across the cold floor and pulled it toward her. She untied the twine. Bread. Fresh, dark bread. Still soft in the middle. Wrapped in clean cloth. Salt pork. A tallow candle. New. Never lit. And underneath everything, folded once, a piece of paper. She opened it. One line. In a shaky hand. I am sorry about your mother. She was kind to me when my own mother died. I never told her thank you. I am telling you now. S. Astrid held the paper by the fire. She read it 3 times. Then she folded it very carefully and slid it into the lining of her coat, next to the deed and the diary. 3 papers now, against her ribs. The deed, the diary, the confession. She looked at the fire. She looked at the bread. She looked at the empty rifle. She looked at the mouth of the hollow, where Silas's boot prints were already filling with fresh snow. Outside, somewhere down the mountain, a wolf called once. A long thin note, then silence. Astrid picked up another stone from the pile beside her. She stood up. She placed it on top of the 2 she had set the night before. 3 stones now, in a small crooked line along the wall of the hollow. It was not much. It was not a wall yet, but it was starting. She whispered in Norwegian to no one in particular, Vi skal sehvafjellet sier. We will see what the mountain says. Then she went outside into the last gray hour before dawn to gather more. The wall fell on the 4th day. Not slowly, not with warning. It fell the way a bad decision falls. All at once, in the middle of the afternoon, with a sound like a hammer dropped from a barn loft. Astrid had been carrying a stone, a flat one, about the size of a dinner plate. She had walked it up from the ledge below 3 trips that morning because the flat ones were the good ones, and the good ones were always the farthest away. She was 6 steps from the hollow when she heard it go. She did not run. Running would have made it worse. She just stood there, holding the flat stone, and watched 3 days of work slide sideways down the mountain. The top row went first, then the middle, then the bottom. Rocks the size of her head bounced off the ledge and disappeared into the pine trees below. One of them cracked. She heard it crack. Sounded like a bone. She stood in the snow. She counted to 10. Because if she did not count to 10, she was going to sit down in the snow and not get back up. And if she sat down in the snow and did not get back up, Ezra Hollister was going to win. She got to 10. She put the flat stone down, carefully, in the exact place the top of the wall had been. Fine, she said out loud, to the mountain, to her father, to whoever was listening. Fine, again. She started walking back down the ledge to gather the fallen stones. Her mother's voice, in her head, in Norwegian. Knock, Knock med detective enough. Enough of that. She wiped her nose on her sleeve. She started again. By sundown, the third wall was 1 row high. Just one. But that 1 row was set into a groove she had scratched with her knife into the frozen ground, and every stone was flat, and every gap was packed with mud she had softened by holding it in her armpits under the coat, until it was warm enough to press. It was a slow way to make mortar. It was the only way she had. Her hands were bleeding through the burlap wraps. She did not look at them. She ate the rest of yesterday's potato and half of one of Silas's slices of salt pork. She was rationing the salt pork. She could not think about the salt pork the way she wanted to think about it. She slept sitting up that night, because when she lay down, the cold came for her ribs, and her ribs remembered the deed, and the diary, and the confession folded there, and she could not sleep, with all 3 papers pressed against her heart. She woke twice. The second time she was crying. She did not know why. She did not remember the dream. She only knew that when she opened her eyes, the fire was almost out, and her face was wet. She fed the fire. Slowly. She went back to work at dawn. The wall took a week. A whole week. 7 days of stones, and mud and frozen fingers, and one long conversation with a mountain that did not answer. But on the 7th evening, when she stepped inside and sat down against the back wall, the wind that came through the entrance rose up over the stones instead of running along the floor. It rose. It slipped over the top. It disappeared out through the gap she had left for the smoke. And the air around her ankles was still, not warm. Nothing on this mountain was warm, but still, which was almost the same thing, which was on a mountain in December exactly the same thing. She put her hands against the finished wall. She said, very quietly, "Thank you," to the wall, to the stones, to her father wherever he was. Then she went outside and added one more stone to the top, because she had promised the mountain she would, and she was learning that the mountain remembered. The days began to have a shape. Morning, wood, noon, improve the wall. Afternoon, set snares, check snares, reset snares. Evening, heat stones. Bank the fire, sleep. The snares mostly caught nothing. Twice they caught a rabbit. Once they caught something bigger and stronger than a rabbit, which had chewed through the wire and left a stain in the snow. She did not follow the stain. She learned things, small things. She learned that dry pine bark, shaved thin, caught a spark better than dry grass. She learned that the moss under the north-facing cliff came off the rock in whole sheets, if you loosened it from the top down. She learned that if you laid 4 flat slate stones directly in the coals for 2 hours, and then rolled them onto a bed of moss with 2 sticks and then covered them with the wool blanket, they gave off heat until almost sunrise. She learned that if you built a small curved shield of stone behind the fire, the heat that would have gone straight up into the cold roof came back to you instead. Not all of it, but some of it, and some of it was more than none of it. She learned that hunger, real hunger, made you clumsy, made you drop things, made you forget where you had put your knife 3 minutes ago, made you cry over a burnt potato. She learned to eat before she was hungry, not after. She learned to lay out tomorrow's firewood, before dark, not in the morning. She learned to listen to the pine trees before she looked at the sky. She learned mostly how quiet a person can become when there is no one to talk to. Some nights she talked to her mother anyway. She did not tell anyone that. There was no one to tell. On the 12th day, she saw the smoke. Not her own smoke, village smoke, from Silver Creek, down in the valley. There was less of it than there should have been. She stood at the edge of the ledge with a hand shading her eyes. She counted the columns. She counted them again. She should have seen 20, maybe more. It was December in Montana. Every house should have had a fire. She counted 12. She counted again. 12. Maybe 13. Something was wrong. Something was very wrong. She stood on the ledge a long time, watching the valley, and the valley did not tell her what. She went back inside and put more stones in the fire. The storm came the next morning. She had known it was coming. The pine trees had leaned east 3 days in a row. The sky the night before had been that hard blue you never see except before a storm that means it. She had 2 full days of wood stacked inside the wall. She stacked another half-day because you never know. Then she went back inside and waited. The wind came first. Not gradually. In one long blow like someone opening a door. The pines started to bend. Then to sway. Then to whip. Loose snow rose off the ridge and turned sideways in the air. The snow came next. Not soft snow. Not the kind children catch on their tongues. The snow came at 45 degrees. Came in sheets. She got back inside. She fed the fire. She sat with her back to the stone wall and pulled the blanket up to her chin. The storm did not stop. For 3 days, the wind hammered the wall on the outside, in gusts that made the loose stones on the top row tremble. Twice she had to go outside in the middle of the day and clear the smoke hole because it was filling with drift. Twice she came back inside, with her eyelashes frozen together. She held her face over the fire until she could blink again, and then she went back to work. She caught nothing in the snares those days. Nothing was moving in that storm. She ate half rations, then quarter rations. Then she boiled the strip of leather off the handle of her father's flint striker and drank the broth. It did not help much. It helped a little. On the second night of the storm, she thought she heard something outside the wall. Not the wind. A voice. Very far away. Very small. She sat up. She held her breath. Nothing. She lay back down. She thought, Astrid, do not go outside in this. If you go outside in this, you will not find your way back to the entrance in 10 feet. She did not go outside. She lay in the dark and told herself she had imagined it. Because if she had not imagined it, someone was on the mountain. In the middle of a Montana storm. Night. In the dark. And there were only 2 kinds of people who would be on this mountain in the middle of a Montana storm at night. The kind who was coming to warn her, and the kind who was coming to kill her. She did not sleep the rest of that night. At first light she went out. She walked around the outside of the wall. She stopped. Twist 4. There were tracks. Boot tracks. Coming up from the west, along the base of the cliff. Not Silas's tracks. Silas walked with his toes turned slightly out. She had noticed. These tracks were bigger. Deeper. Whoever had made them had been heavy, or had been carrying weight, or both. The tracks came within 20 feet of her wall. Then they stopped. Then they turned around and went back. She followed them a little way down the slope. Not far. Only 100 yards or so, until the drifts began to fill them, and she lost the trail. She stood in the snow, looking down the mountain, and she thought, Ezra. She thought it. She let herself think it. Then she thought, no, wait, because Ezra Hollister did not walk up a mountain in a blizzard. Ezra Hollister was 60 years old and had a bad back. Ezra Hollister sent other people to walk up mountains for him. But the tracks were too big for Silas, which meant someone else had come. Seen her wall, seen her smoke and turned back without calling out to her. She went back inside and put a fresh log on the fire. She sat with her father's empty rifle across her knees for the first time in 2 weeks. She did not eat that morning. She could not. Something on the mountain had noticed her. She spent the rest of that day making the wall thicker. Not higher. Thicker. She dragged evergreen branches from the pines around the ledge and packed them against the outside of the stones. Then she pushed snow into the branches with her hands until the whole thing looked like a rough hill instead of a wall. By evening, from 20 feet away, you could not see the wall anymore. Only a low bump in the drift. Only a thread of smoke coming out of what looked like nothing. She stood back and looked at it. Better, she thought. Not good. Better. That night she heard the voice again. Closer. She sat up. So fast the blanket fell into the fire, and she had to slap it out with her bare hands. The voice came again. Astrid. Cracked. Old. Not Silas. She grabbed the rifle. She grabbed the knife. She stood with her back to the fire, facing the entrance. Astrid Larson. Closer still. just outside the wall now. The voice was breaking. Someone was crying. Someone was crying and freezing and calling her name into the wind. She whispered, so low the fire almost drowned it. Who's there? A long pause. Then, Reverend Cole. Astrid closed her eyes. Because Reverend Obadiah Cole was 71 years old. Because Reverend Obadiah Cole had a bad hip and a worse chest and had not been seen outside his own front porch after dark in 8 years. Because Reverend Obadiah Cole had also been the man who would not look at her father. She opened her eyes. She lowered the rifle, but not all the way. Come around to the entrance, she said. Slow. He came slow, because he could not come any other way. He came around the wall on hands and knees, half crawling. His black coat was white with snow. His hat was gone. There was blood on his forehead, where he had fallen somewhere on the climb. His beard was frozen into his collar. He was shaking, so hard he could not make his hands work. She pulled him inside. She dragged him. He was not heavy. He was a bag of bones under a black wool coat. She dragged him to the fire and pushed him down onto the moss bed and pulled the blanket around him. He tried to speak. Later, she said. Warm first. She melted snow in the tin cup. She held it to his lips. He got half of it down. He got warmer. Slowly. She watched the shaking come down, from his whole body to just his hands. Only then did she sit back on her heels and look at him. Reverend. Yes. Why are you here? He closed his eyes. He opened them. He said, because I have been a coward. For 14 months. Astrid did not answer. He drew the map. Astrid. I saw him draw it. I was in the back of the store the day he brought it to your father. I saw, and I said nothing, because he holds the mortgage on the church. Because if I speak, he takes the church. Because, I have been telling myself because for so long that I have forgotten what the truth even tastes like. Astrid still did not answer. He looked at her. I tried to write it down, he said. I wrote it in the front of my Bible, in pencil, so I could pretend I had not written it. Coward's ink. But I wrote it. He fumbled inside his coat with shaking fingers. He pulled out a Bible. Small, black, water-stained. He handed it to her. She opened the front cover. In shaky pencil on the inside of the leather. October 12, 1885. Ezra Hollister gave Eric Larson a false map to Cold Spring Pass. He knew the route was closed. He knew the pass would kill them. I did not stop him. God forgive me. Oh, Cole. Astrid stared at the page. The pencil trembled on the paper the way the old man's hand was trembling now. She closed the Bible. She held it against her chest. Because for the first time in 14 months, the truth was not only in her head. It was written down. By someone else. Someone Ezra could not call hysterical. Someone Ezra could not call foreign. Someone Ezra had been paying to stay silent. Reverend Cole looked up at her. Ezra saw me leave the church tonight, he said. He was in the square, watching me. I said I was going to my sister's in the next valley. I said I was leaving before the storm got worse. He tried to smile, came out crooked. He didn't believe me. Astrid's hand tightened on the Bible. He is coming up the mountain, Astrid. Tonight. He knows I have written this. He knows I am bringing it to you. I saw it in his face. He grabbed her wrist. His hand was cold as iron. You have to hide the Bible before he gets here, because if he finds it, he burns it. And if he burns it, we are back to your word against his. Astrid stood up. Her mind was moving in 6 directions. Where do I hide it? Not in the wall, he might tear the wall down. Not in the moss, he will kick the moss apart. Not on me, if he kills me, he finds it. She looked around the hollow. The rock roof. There was a crack in the rock roof. A hairline crack she had noticed weeks ago, above where the fire pit was. Small enough that no one would look. Big enough for a small book pushed in edge first. She grabbed the Bible. She climbed up onto the flat rock beside the fire. She wedged the Bible into the crack. She pushed it in with the handle of the skinning knife until it disappeared. She scraped a little soot from the roof and rubbed it over the edge until you could not see anything at all. She climbed down. Reverend. He was slumping. His eyes were closing. Reverend, stay awake. One more thing. Widow Doyle. Why did you tell me to go to her? His eyes opened. Just because, he whispered. Because her husband did not die of consumption. Ezra called in a note. 15 years ago, her husband hanged himself in the barn. Ezra told her that if she spoke, he would tell the village her husband was a suicide, and the church would not bury him beside her plot. So she has kept quiet. 15 years. His hand tightened on her wrist. When you go down, go to her first. Not the sheriff. Not the council. Her. She has been waiting 15 years for someone to give her a reason. I will. Astrid. Yes. There is one more thing you should know. He looked at her, full in the face, the way he had never looked at her father. Silas is not his son. She stopped breathing. Twist 5. Not by blood, Cole said. His mother was Ezra's second wife. She came to this village with a boy already born. Ezra married her because she had a small inheritance. When the money was gone, so was she. But the boy stayed. Ezra has never told him. Ezra uses that boy like a hammer. But he is not Ezra's son. He is a good man's son. His father was a Danish sailor who died at sea. Silas has never known. Astrid sat down beside him. Slowly. Does anyone know? 2 people, Cole whispered. I baptized him. His mother told me before she left. And Widow Doyle knows. Widow Doyle was the midwife at his birth. He closed his eyes. Tell him, Astrid, when it is time. Tell him that boy is not going to hang for what his father did. Because he does not have his father's blood in him. Not a drop. Reverend. Yes. Stay awake. Please. I need you to stay awake. I am trying, child. She pulled the blanket up around his throat. She sat back on her heels. She heard it. Outside the wall. A boot. Not Silas's. Not Cole's. Heavier. Slow. Deliberate. Someone was climbing the last 20 feet up to the ledge. Astrid put her hand on the empty rifle. She looked at Reverend Cole. He was awake. Barely. He nodded at her once. She looked at the crack in the roof where the Bible was hidden. Invisible. She looked at the entrance. She stood up. She positioned herself so that the fire was between her and whoever was outside, so that they would see her silhouette against the flames, and not her face, and not her hands, and not the way her hands were shaking. The boots stopped just outside the wall. Silence. She held the empty rifle level. She said, in the steadiest voice she had ever used in her life, whoever you are, turn around and go back down the mountain. A pause. Then, a voice. Cold. Slow. Amused. Miss Larson. Ezra Hollister. Come out. She did not move. Miss Larson. I know Reverend Cole is up here. His tracks come to your entrance. I have been following them since the church. Astrid's heart was in her throat. He is not here, she called out. Miss Larson, do not lie to me. He is not here. A long silence. Then you will not mind if I come inside and warm up. She raised the rifle higher. One more step and I fire. He laughed. Softly. Almost kindly. Miss Larson, there have not been bullets in that rifle since March. I know because I bought the last of them off your father in February. He needed the money. Astrid's stomach dropped through the floor. He knew. He had always known. She had been holding an empty rifle at him, and he had known the whole time. She heard him take one step forward, then another. He was ducking to come through the entrance. Behind her, on the moss bed, Reverend Cole made a small sound. A soft, tired sound. Ezra stopped. He had heard it. His head lifted slightly, listening. His slate eyes found hers across the fire. He smiled. Reverend, he called out gently. Are you there, old friend? Cole opened his eyes. Fully. He looked at Astrid. He nodded once. Slow. On purpose. Then he said, very clearly, loud enough for Ezra to hear, I am here, Ezra, and I have written it all down. Ezra's face changed. He stepped fully inside the hollow. He was covered in snow. His beard was white with it. He looked at Cole on the moss bed. He looked at Astrid across the fire. He looked at the rifle in her hands. He said very quietly, You have made this so much harder than it needed to be, and he reached inside his coat. Astrid did not wait to see what he was reaching for. She threw the empty rifle at his head. It hit him across the temple. Not hard enough to drop him. Hard enough to make him step back and swear. She lunged for the fire. She grabbed one of the heated slate stones. Not with her hand. With a folded piece of blanket. She had done this 100 times in the last 3 weeks. She knew exactly how to lift a stone that hot. She threw it. It hit Ezra in the shoulder. His coat caught fire. He roared. He beat at his shoulder with his other hand. She grabbed the second slate. She threw it. Missed. She grabbed the third. He was up. He was coming for her. He had something in his hand now. Small. Dark. Not a rifle. Pistol. A short pistol. He raised it. She threw the third slate. It hit his wrist. The pistol fired. The shot went up into the roof. Rock chips rained down onto the fire. The Bible in its crack did not fall out. Ezra dropped the pistol. He was clutching his wrist. He was cursing in a low, steady growl. Not words, just sound. Astrid did not stop. She grabbed her father's skinning knife. She grabbed Reverend Cole under the arms. She dragged him, backward, toward the narrow gap at the back of the hollow that she had noticed on her 3rd day and had never told anyone about. She shoved him through the gap. She squeezed through after him. She turned. She kicked loose the pile of stones she had stacked beside the gap for exactly this reason. They tumbled down and half blocked the opening. She heard Ezra get to his feet. She heard him kick over the fire. She heard him scream her name. Then she heard him do something she had not expected. She heard him start to laugh. Low, steady, ugly. Little Norwegian, he called through the stones. You clever little Norwegian. She held Reverend Cole against her chest in the dark of the back pocket, and she did not answer. Do you know what happens now, little Norwegian? She did not answer. Now I go back down. Now I tell the village that the old Reverend came up here to bring you the word of God, and you killed him with a rock, because you have gone mad, because grief has broken you. Silence. Or you come out right now, and you give me back that Bible, and I let you walk down off this mountain tonight, alone, free. You go south. You never come back. She closed her eyes. For one small second. For 1 second, she thought about it, because she was 19, and cold, and hungry, and south was easy. She opened her eyes. She whispered, into Reverend Cole's white hair, any eye. No. She waited. Ezra waited. Neither of them spoke for a long time. Then, on the other side of the stones, she heard him sigh. She heard him spit into the fire. She heard his boots turn and walk away. Out of the hollow. Across the ledge. Down the mountain. She did not move for 2 hours. When she was sure, when she was absolutely sure Ezra was gone, she squeezed back out through the gap. The fire was scattered. Smoking. Ash everywhere. But the wall was standing. The Bible was still in the crack. And on the floor of the hollow, glinting in the last coals, was Ezra Hollister's short pistol. He had left it, dropped when the slate hit his wrist. She picked it up. She checked the chamber. 5 bullets left. She weighed it in her hand. She looked at Reverend Cole. He was still breathing. Thin, slow, but breathing. She said very softly, You told me the truth. Rest now. I have work to do. She rebuilt the fire. She sat with him until dawn. He did not wake. But he did not die. Not yet. Reverend Cole died at first light. He opened his eyes once. He looked at Astrid. He said, Tell Silas. About his father. Then he breathed out. And he did not breathe in again. Astrid closed his eyes with 2 fingers, the way her mother had closed her grandfather's eyes in a farmhouse in Bergen, when Astrid was 7. She said the small Norwegian prayer her mother had said then. She did not cry, because there was no time to cry, because Ezra Hollister was already down the mountain, and by first light he would be telling his story to 12 columns of chimney smoke, and by second light he would have 6 men in his kitchen loading rifles. She had until dawn broke over the valley. Maybe less. She stood up. She went to work. She wrapped Reverend Cole in the wool blanket. Not to hide him, to honor him. Then she took his Bible down from the crack in the roof. She took the pencil confession, the deed, her mother's diary, Silas's note. 5 pieces of paper. 6, counting the Bible itself. She wrapped all of it inside the oilcloth. She tied it with twine. She slid the whole bundle inside the front of her coat. She picked up Ezra Hollister's short pistol. She checked the chamber again. 5 bullets. She would not use it. She knew she would not use it. But 5 bullets in a pistol on a 19-year-old girl's hip changes the way a village listens. She put the pistol in the deep pocket of her father's coat. She looked around the hollow one last time. The wall she had built. The moss bed. The curved reflector behind the fire. Reverend Cole, wrapped in her mother's blanket, small as a child. She said, out loud to the hollow itself, "I am coming back." Then she stepped out into the storm. The wind was worse now. Of course it was worse. She followed the wall of the cliff with her mittened hand. She kept the cliff on her right. She counted her steps out loud. 1, 2, 3, 4. 5, 6, 7, 8. 9, 10. Her mother's voice in her head. Not fast. Steady. Fast is how you drop a stitch. Steady is how you finish a sock. She fell once. Hard. Onto one knee. The pistol dug into her hip. She got back up. The trees started to change. The 2 leaning pines. The dark patch where the moss grew even in winter. The place where the trail came up from the valley. She was almost off the mountain. The sun was not up yet, but the sky in the east was the color of an old bruise. Yellow behind gray. Coming. She stopped at the tree line. She looked down at the village. Silver Creek was the smallest she had ever seen it. 11 columns of chimney smoke. Not 12. She had left a village of 20 families 3 weeks ago. She was coming back to a village of 11 fires. She started down. She did not go to the meeting house. She did not go to Ezra Hollister's house. She went where Reverend Cole had told her to go. She went to Widow Doyle. The Doyle place sat at the west edge of the village. A small cabin. A smaller barn. The barn where a man had hanged himself 15 years ago, because Elder Ezra Hollister had called in a note that was not due. Astrid climbed the porch. Her legs were shaking. So badly she could hear her own boots knock against the wood. She knocked. Nothing. She knocked again. The door cracked open 2 inches. An eye looked out. An old eye, blue as a winter creek, set in a face so lined it looked like the face of the mountain itself. The eye widened. The door opened all the way. Widow Hester Doyle stood in her doorway in a nightgown and a black shawl, with her white hair loose down her back, and she stared at Astrid Larson, as if she were looking at a ghost that owed her something. "Child, ma'am, you are alive. For now. Come inside. Ma'am, before I come inside, I have to know something." The old woman waited. Astrid's voice cracked, but she kept it steady. "Ezra Hollister killed my parents. He drew a false map. He sent them into Cold Spring Pass. Reverend Cole saw him do it. Reverend Cole is dead. He died in my arms an hour ago on that mountain, because he came up to bring me this." She reached inside her coat. She pulled out the Bible. She held it up. Widow Doyle looked at the Bible. Her face did not change. Not yet. Astrid opened the front cover. She turned it around. She held it out, so the old woman could read the pencil confession in the light of the doorway. Widow Doyle read it. Her hand came up to her mouth. She read it again. Then her hand came away, and her jaw set, and something happened in her face that Astrid would remember for the rest of her life. 15 years came into that old woman's face. and stayed. "Come inside," she said again. Not the same voice as before, a different voice. Astrid came inside. Widow Doyle closed the door. She said, "Sit down at that table, child." Astrid sat. Widow Doyle went to the stove. She poured hot coffee into a tin mug. She set it in front of Astrid. She said, "Drink." Astrid drank. And then, because the coffee was hot, and the room was warm, and the old woman across the table had eyes the color of a winter creek, that were finally looking at her, Astrid began to cry. Not loud. Not the way girls in books cry. Silent. Steady. The way you cry when you have been holding it for 3 weeks on a mountain alone. Widow Doyle did not say anything. She got up from her chair. She came around the table. She sat down next to Astrid. She put her old thin arms around her. And Astrid Larsen, who had not been held by anyone since her mother left in October of 1885, put her face against the black shawl of Widow Hester Doyle and cried like a child. The old woman rocked her, slowly, the way you rock a baby who has been screaming for hours and has finally forgotten why. "There now," Widow Doyle whispered. "There now, child. You are not alone anymore. You are not alone. Do you hear me? You are not alone." Astrid heard her. Astrid heard her. Twist 6. After a long minute, Widow Doyle sat back. She wiped Astrid's face with her thumb. "Now listen to me," she said, "because we do not have time. Ezra Hollister came home in the storm last night. I saw the lamp go on in his kitchen at 3 in the morning. He did not go to bed. He knocked on doors. He is telling a story." "I know. Do you know the story?" "He is blaming Silas." Widow Doyle nodded once. Grim. "He is telling the village that Silas confessed. That Silas drew the map. That Silas went up the mountain last night to silence the Reverend. Ezra says he tried to stop him. Ezra says Silas has run off." But Silas has not run off." Astrid stared at her. "Prudence came to my back door before dawn," Widow Doyle said. "In her nightdress, in tears. Ezra locked Silas in the root cellar last night, when he came down from the mountain. Prudence heard him take Silas down there. She has been listening at the cellar door all night. Silas is still alive, but he is very cold. And Ezra is going to bring the village to that cellar this morning. And Ezra is going to open the door. And Ezra is going to find Silas dead of exposure. And Ezra is going to grieve loudly in front of the whole village and blame you for driving his son mad." Astrid stood up. Because there was no time. Because Silas was dying in a hole in the ground, and Astrid Larsen had 2 hours to stop it. "Where is Prudence now?" "Behind my house, in my washroom, hiding. She has a key to the cellar. She took it off Ezra's belt while he slept." "Yes." Astrid closed her eyes. She thought about Reverend Cole. His last words. "Tell Silas. About his father." She opened her eyes. "Ma'am." "Yes. Reverend Cole told me something else. About Silas. Something you also know." Widow Doyle went very still. "He is not Ezra's son." The old woman closed her eyes. "No," she whispered. "He is not. His father was a Danish sailor." "Yes." "You were the midwife." "Yes." "Ezra has never told him." "No." Astrid took a breath. "When we bring him out of that cellar," she said, "I want to tell him, before we walk into the square, because that boy is going to have to stand up and testify against a man he thinks is his father. And I do not want him carrying the weight of that word 1 minute longer than he has to." Widow Doyle stood up. Slowly, she wiped her hands on her apron. "Then we tell him," she said, "the 3 of us, in the barn, before we walk. Come on, child." She threw a heavy coat over her nightgown. She pulled boots over bare feet. She wrapped the 6 pieces of evidence back inside the oilcloth. She tucked the whole bundle under her own coat, against her own ribs. "Safer with me for now," she said. "He will not shoot a widow in her nightgown on a public street. Probably Probably. Come on, child. They stepped out into the dawn. They went for Prudence first. She was in the washroom, shivering in her thin coat, her hands folded over her belly. She saw them. She saw Astrid alive. She began to cry. Astrid took her by the shoulders. Prudence. He is dying, Astrid. I could hear him breathing all night. He is dying. He is not going to die. Give me the key. She pressed the iron key into Astrid's hand. The three of them walked around the side of the White House. The root cellar door was in the ground, half buried under a drift. A heavy wooden door with an iron ring. Astrid brushed the snow away. She fit the key into the lock. Turned. She lifted the door. Cold air came up. Not the dead cold of the outside. The living cold of something breathing. She held up the lantern. Silas Hollister lay on the dirt floor of the cellar in a coat that was not thick enough. He was gray. His lips were blue. His hands were tied at the wrist in front of him with a length of horse tack. He looked up at the light. He saw her. He tried to say her name. His teeth clicked. He could not. Astrid climbed down the ladder. She cut the horse tack with her father's knife. She helped him sit up. Silas. Silas. Stay with me. Astrid. Yes. He told them. He told the village I did it. I know. He said I confessed. Astrid. I didn't. I know. Listen to me. She held his face in her hands. His skin was so cold it was hot. Listen to me, Silas. There is something you need to know. Before we walk out of this cellar. Reverend Cole told me on the mountain last night. He wanted me to tell you. Are you listening to me? He nodded. Ezra Hollister is not your father. Silas stared at her. Your mother came to Silver Creek, with you already in her arms. Your father was a Danish sailor, who died at sea, before you were born. Reverend Cole baptized you. Widow Doyle was there. You have never had Ezra Hollister's blood in you. Not a drop. He closed his eyes. He put his forehead against her shoulder. And for one long moment, in that cold cellar, a 26-year-old man cried the way a small boy cries when someone has finally answered a question he did not know he had been asking his whole life. He kept telling me I was his son, Silas whispered. He kept telling me I was his son. You never were. He kept telling me, Silas, listen to me. You are your mother's son, and you are a Danish sailor's son. And in an hour you are going to walk into that square and you are going to stand up and you are going to testify. And when you do, you are not testifying against your father. You are testifying against a man who stole your name for 26 years. He looked up at her. His eyes were wet, but they had changed. Get me up, he said. Astrid got him up. Widow Doyle and Prudence took him under the arms. They walked him into the White House and put him beside the stove. Prudence stripped his frozen coat off and put a dry one on him. Widow Doyle poured coffee down his throat. Astrid stood in the kitchen. She looked at Widow Doyle. Widow Doyle looked at Astrid. Neither of them said it, because they did not need to. Silas. He looked up. Silas. One thing. Where is Ezra's rifle? Above the mantel. In the parlor. Loaded. Always. Astrid turned to Prudence. Prudence. Your father was a gunsmith. Yes. Can you take the firing pin out of a rifle? In 2 minutes. Blindfolded. There is a rifle above the mantel. And 2 pistols in his gun cabinet upstairs. All 3. Now. Fast. Prudence went. She came back in 6 minutes. Her hands were black with oil. She held up 3 small pieces of metal. 3 firing pins. She dropped them in the wood stove. They went into the fire. They melted. By the time the rest of the village gathered in the square, Ezra Hollister's guns were metal jewelry. Astrid took a breath. Now, she said. The doors. The 4 of them went out together. Widow Doyle went east. Prudence went west. Astrid took the north row. Silas, wrapped in 2 coats, walked door to door with her. At every door, one of them said the same thing. Come to the square. Now. Bring your husband. Bring your grown children. Do not bring Ezra. Come. Now. Doors opened. Faces asked questions. The four of them did not answer. They only said, come. Now. By the time the sun was fully up, over the eastern ridge, there were 42 people in the village square of Silver Creek. Every family that still had someone alive. They stood in the square, in the snow, in their heaviest coats. Confused, cold, whispering to each other. Astrid walked to the middle, Widow Doyle beside her, Prudence with her arm around Silas. The village saw Silas. The village went silent, because Ezra had told them last night that Silas had confessed and run off in the night. And here he was, standing, in the square, beside his wife, beside Astrid, not hiding. The door of the White House opened. Ezra Hollister stepped out onto his porch. He was wearing his good coat, his good hat. His slate eyes swept across the square. They stopped on Silas. They did not move for a long second. Then they moved to Astrid, and they stopped there. He came down the porch steps. He walked across the square. He walked the way a man walks, who does not know, yet that he has already lost. He stopped 10 feet from Astrid. He said, "This is a hard day for our village. I am sorry to have to say what I am about to say." Astrid did not answer. He looked around at the village. "My son," he said, and his voice broke perfectly, the way a preacher's voice breaks. "My son, 2 nights ago, confessed to me that he drew the map that killed the Larsons. He begged me to hide him. I hid him at the church, but this morning he escaped in the night and went up the mountain to silence the only witness who was left." He turned his slate eyes back to Astrid. "Miss Larson, I do not know how you came down alive, but I am glad you did, because now this village can hear the truth." The village stood. Nobody spoke. Astrid took 1 step forward. She said, "Elder Hollister." He waited. She said, "You have 4 minutes to tell this village the whole truth, or I tell it for you." He smiled, kindly. "Miss Larson, you are cold, and tired, and grieving. Come sit down by the fire. Let us take care of you. 4 minutes. Miss Larson." 3. Widow Doyle took a step forward. She pulled the oilcloth bundle out from under her coat. She untied it. She began to hand things around. The deed, into a farmer's hand. The diary, into a wife's hand. Silas's confession from the mountain, into a blacksmith's hand. Widow Doyle's own stack of illegal notes, into 3 different hands. The Bible. Widow Doyle held onto that one herself. She opened it. She held it up. She said, in a voice loud enough for the whole square, "This is Reverend Obadiah Cole's Bible. Reverend Cole died on that mountain this morning. He climbed up in the storm to bring this to Miss Larson. In the front of this Bible he wrote in his own hand that Ezra Hollister drew a false map that killed Eric and Ingeborg Larson. Ezra Hollister then followed Reverend Cole up that mountain last night to silence him. Miss Larson watched him try. Silence. Perfect, terrible silence. Ezra's face did not change, but his hand went inside his coat. For the short pistol. His hand came out empty. He reached for the second pistol. Not there. He looked toward the porch, toward his house, toward the rifle above the mantel and the guns in the cabinet. His slate eyes came back to Astrid. She reached into her coat pocket. She pulled out his short pistol. She held it up, not pointed, just visible. "Looking for this," she said. His face finally changed. He took a step backward. He took another. And then Silas Hollister stepped forward. Twist 7. Silas walked past Astrid. He walked past Widow Doyle. He walked until he was standing 5 feet from Ezra. He said, loud enough for the whole square to hear, "You are not my father." Ezra's mouth opened. "You have never been my father. You knew that. Reverend Cole knew that. Widow Doyle knew that. My mother knew that when she left. Everyone in this square who has been in this village longer than 15 years knew that. Except me. Because you needed a son to lean on. So you kept a fatherless boy quiet. Silas's voice cracked, but it did not stop. You killed the Larsons. You killed my reverend. You put me in a hole in the ground last night to freeze. And you told this village I was the one who drew the map. He took one more step. I am not your son. I have never been your son. And I am going to stand in the witness box in Helena, and I am going to tell the judge everything I have known, and everything I have been afraid to know, and I am going to watch them put a rope around your neck. Because that is what a Danish sailor's son does. Silence. Ezra Hollister stared at him. For the first time in 26 years, Ezra Hollister did not know what to say. He turned. He tried to run. He got 6 steps. 2 farmers. 2 of them. Farmers he had loaned money to. Farmers he had leaned on for 15 years. 2 of them stepped into his path and took him by the arms. He tried to shake them off. They did not let go. More men stepped in. By the time Ezra Hollister was on the ground in the snow of the village square, there were 7 men on top of him, and none of them said a word, and none of them let go. Astrid did not watch. She turned to the village. She said very quietly, so quietly that the whole square had to lean toward her. She said, "There is time to be angry later." She said, "Right now this village is dying." She said, 11 fires this morning, 12 2 days ago, 23 weeks ago. If we do not start now, there will be no village left to be angry in. She lifted the small notebook she had been keeping in her coat. She said, "I learned some things on the mountain. My father taught me most of them. My mother taught me the rest. Reverend Cole died this morning carrying the truth of who did this to us. But he is not what we need right now. What we need right now is warm stones, and moss beds, and stone walls, and reflectors behind our fires. Come with me. I will show you, every one of you, every house, before dark." She looked at Widow Doyle. She looked at Prudence. She looked at Silas. She looked at the 11 columns of smoke over the 11 remaining fires of Silver Creek. She said, "The mountain taught me. Now I teach you, and then no one in this valley dies of cold again." The village of Silver Creek broke into pieces. Not the bad kind of pieces, the kind of pieces that go to work. Widow Doyle organized the women. Prudence organized the men who had strong backs. Silas, with a blanket around his shoulders, and his teeth still clicking, walked from house to house showing what he had watched Astrid do in the hollow. Astrid herself moved from cabin to cabin. She showed them how to lift a bed off the frozen floor with pine boughs and moss. She showed them how to lay a flat slate in the coals for 2 hours, and then move it under a wool blanket with 2 sticks. She showed them how to build a small curved shield of stone behind the fire that pushed the heat back where it was needed. By nightfall, every house in Silver Creek had done at least one of the 3 things. By the second night, every house had done all 3. The cold that came in on the 3rd day was the worst cold anyone in the valley could remember. Water buckets froze inside cabins, with fires burning 6 feet away. Tree trunks split in the woods with sounds like rifle shots. But when the sun came up on the 4th morning, every door in Silver Creek opened. Everyone, every family stepped out into the frozen light. Nobody had a new body to bury. Nobody. The bell of Iron Rail was not rung, because there was nothing to ring it for. Sheriff Jonas Kerr came in from Helena a week later, when the road opened. He took Ezra Hollister down to the county seat in Irons. The trial was short. The pencil confession in the front of Reverend Cole's Bible was the piece of evidence that ended it. The verdict came in on the 3rd day. The sentence came in on the 4th. Ezra Hollister was hanged in Helena in the middle of February 1887. Silas went to the hanging. He did not have to. Nobody in the village would have thought less of him if he stayed home. But he went. He rode down to Helena alone. He stood in the back of the crowd. He watched the man he had once called Father drop through the trapdoor. He did not cheer. He did not weep. He only watched, because a Danish sailor's son does not turn away. When it was over, he rode home. He walked into his own kitchen. Prudence was there with the baby, who had been born 3 weeks early, and was small but strong. He sat down at the table. He put his face in his hands. Prudence put the baby in his arms. He held his daughter for the first time. He named her Ingeborg, after Astrid's mother. Astrid stood as godmother at the christening. She did not speak during the service. She only held the baby and looked at the small face and thought her mother would have laughed at the size of the mouth. Astrid moved back into her parents' cabin that April. She lit her mother's kettle. She sat in her father's chair. She turned the tin cup right side up on the kitchen table for the first time in a year and a half. She did not live there alone. Widow Hester Doyle moved in with her 3 weeks after the trial. The old woman said her own cabin was too big for one person, and there was no talking her out of it, and there did not need to be. They shared the kitchen. They shared the bread oven. They shared the winters. In the evenings, Widow Doyle sat by the fire and knitted socks, and Astrid sat across from her and read out loud, first from her mother's diary. Then, when she had read the diary through, from her father's old books, and then, when those were gone, from any book she could get her hands on. They did not talk about Ezra Hollister after that first year. They did not need to. The homestead land went back into Astrid's name legally that spring. The mountain water rights, the ones Ezra Hollister had killed for, Astrid deeded to the village of Silver Creek as common water. Nobody was allowed to sell it. Nobody was allowed to buy it. It belonged to whoever needed it, forever. That summer, Astrid went up the mountain to bury Reverend Cole properly. Silas and 2 of the Sawmill brothers went with her. They carried him down in the wool blanket. They laid him beside his own church. The whole village came for the burial. Astrid stood over the grave. She said, in a voice loud enough for everyone, "He was a coward for 14 months. He was a brave man for one night. God is going to weigh those 2 things, and I think the one night is going to be heavier." Nobody argued with her. The stone wall on the mountain stayed standing. Every winter after that one, women in Silver Creek climbed up together and built new small stone shelters along the lower slopes of Silver Ridge. Not big ones. Not fancy ones. Just walls and moss beds and reflectors and smoke holes. Hunters used them. Shepherds used them. Travelers caught in storms used them. And in the winter of 1892, a young woman came down out of those mountains, thin and quiet, and knocked on Astrid Larson's kitchen door. She was maybe 20, maybe 22. She had been walking for 3 days. Her coat was too thin. Her boots were split at the seams. She had a black eye that was almost healed and a fresh one that was not. Astrid opened the door. The young woman said, "Ma'am, my brother-in-law took the farm. He had a paper I could not read. I walked 3 days. I found a stone shelter on the mountain. It had heated slate in the coals. Someone had left it that morning. I do not know who. I stayed the night. I would have died. Ma'am, I would have died." Astrid looked at her for a long moment. She stepped back from the doorway. "Come in, child," she said. "Widow Doyle is making soup." The young woman came in. Widow Doyle looked up from the stove. She saw the young woman. She saw the black eye. She saw the split boots. She did not say anything. She just got another bowl down from the shelf. She set it on the table. She said, "Sit." The young woman sat. Widow Doyle put soup in front of her. The young woman began to cry, silently, into the soup. Astrid sat down across from her. She reached across the table. She put her hand on the young woman's hand. She said, "You are not alone anymore. You are not alone. Do you hear me? You are not alone." The young woman looked up. She heard her. She heard her. The children who grew up in Silver Creek, after that winter, always asked the same question, when they were old enough to hear the story. Why did she save them? After what they did to her? And the old women of the village, the ones who had been girls that winter or wives or widows or the ones who had opened doors when Widow Doyle and Astrid knocked, they always answered the same way. They said, "She saved them because she could." They said she saved them because her father had told her once to go, where the land still tells the truth, and the land had told her the truth, and the truth had been that a village of frightened people is not the same thing as a village of evil people, and a girl who has learned that can walk down off any mountain in the world, and she can knock on any door, and she can hand out warmth like it was hers to give.